All right, good evening, Realty Pros. Welcome to another Thursday evening agent training. We are hybrid, both at the Upper Marlboro location and virtually, of course. So welcome to everybody who's joined us online, and welcome to everybody in the office as well. We are gonna get started. We are talking about negotiating winning offers. So we're gonna be talking about some strategies for offer writing. We're gonna go through some of the fundamentals, but we're also gonna hear what the most effective strategies have been in this market, especially considering all the competition in our local real estate climate during this COVID time, to make sure that you're equipped with what you need to set your buyers up for success when writing those offers for them. Okay. So before we begin, we have a panelist that we're going to be, I will, of course, open it up to the floor because all of our trainings are interactive. So if you guys have a question or something to add, by all means, unmute yourselves so that you can join the conversation. I'm going to be asking some strategies of at least Curtis, and we may have one other person on the line that I've already prepped to be ready to jump in on this because I want you guys to be able to glean from each other as well. This is going to be followed by our offer writing boot camp. So our offer writing boot camp is going to be coming up. It's going to be a Saturday training for you guys that are dual career or have hectic weekday schedules. No worries, you'll be able to attend, and it will be virtual also. So stay tuned for the date of that Saturday offer writing boot camp for you guys. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. All right, writing a great offer. Curtis, would you do me a favor and just walk us through some of the components of writing a great offer? And we'll talk about what makes the offer great versus just any offer submitted.
Yeah, sure. I think some of the key components to writing a great offer, first off, is the overall flow and organization of the offer. I know that the offers that that we write at Porterhouse tend to be very specific, very methodical. And just being on the listing side, I have seen offers and they're just all over the place. They're very not presented well. They're not written well. Just the way that the offer looks and feels. The first thing that we have is our kind of like our thank you letter from the broker, thanking that listing agent for allowing us basically the opportunity to present the property. The next page is probably, to me, one of the biggest benefits of the way that we structure our offers, and that's because it gets down to the meat and potatoes. Like out the gate, you're going to see, the property, but more importantly, the purchase price, the financing type, the EMD, any seller concession, all of these things that, transfer and recordation, which is very important.
Yes,
Properly disclosing your transfer and recordation is very, if you've been on some of the past calls, the lender, the title company. So this particular page to me is probably one of the more important real pages out of the entire offer, because it's going to just, if you got 5 offers, if you have a bunch of offers coming in, that listing agent wants to see what's the deal, what's going on, what's going to be in this. Is it even, of course they're going to show or disclose all the offers, what have you, but it's just going to really present yourself as the buying agent, that you're professional, that you understand the key components that they're going to be looking for. And it's right there. It's the second page. So those first 2 pages, and then under that, I'm not sure what's in this particular one, but I like to have at this point, if it's very competitive, if I know it's going to be competitive, this is where I might slide in the letter. Is that the sample? Yeah. So I'll put in the letter, from the buyer, from my buyer, basically begging and pleading for our offer to get accepted. But so this is like a nice letter. We do have a template in Porterhouse. You can basically go through that. You kind of make it your own. These are also things that will stand out and why you need to really pay attention when you're on the showing. And if that particular property step like really jumps out, if I know I'm going to have to do the letter, I'll even send a text to my client and be like, hey, give me your top three things that really stood out to you about the property. And, of course they might come back and be like, hey, I like the kitchen, I like the bathroom, and I like the yard. So these things will then, I'll make sure I weave those in if they have children, even if they have pets, because sometimes that dog language is key, is big. Like the Labrador retrievers are going to love, the backyard running around. It might sound a little cheesy, but that stuff really, it works. So this would be, where I would drop the letter. And then under this is where basically I would want to really present the money. Here's going to be, understanding whom, but is that, because that's what I typically would have okay. Yeah, I'd have the pre-approval letter and then the image of the EMD, yep. And then after that, it's kind of like now we get into the contractual understanding whom, the dual agency document, and then basically we would roll into the actual, I forget the name of the the real offer, the contract of sale. So we would jump into that. And I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so pause right there for a minute. Curtis, That was an excellent overview of what differentiates just the offer in and of itself from any old offer, because we haven't even gotten into the terms of the contract just yet. And what you guys are going to notice very much on the purchase side, you'll know how effectively you're able to get your buyer's offers accepted. And then on the listing side, you'll know very well too, because you're going to be familiar with the ones and the terms that are most attractive to your sellers, and knowing which of those terms are going to be your heaviest hitters. So those are things that are going to give you insight right offhand. But Curtis mentioned some things that I just want us to dissect a little bit, right? When you are going under contract and you're working with the listing agent, as you've heard Curtis say, they're looking at much more than just the purchase price. They're judging your offer so that they know what they're getting into. You as an agent, what is the flow of your offer? Is it organized? Welcome, Marcus. Is your offer all organized? Do you have all of the meat and potatoes, as Curtis said, in there? Do you have your buyer's financial documents? Do you have your earnest money deposit? Did you add a layer of finesse on there, if you will, by talking about the beautiful Labrador retrievers that are going to enjoy the backyard? All of those things, those are actually features that letter creates an emotional connection to the seller. So we can tell you some stories that'll make us cry, for a time when our offer was competing with another offer and our offer did not get accepted because that buyer didn't submit that letter. And normally we would ask them what they want to say and we would write it on their behalf if they don't have time to do it. And from that day until now, whenever we're doing an offer, that letter has to be in there, because we remember that buyer, they did not get their offer accepted because they didn't do that letter. So we said, now, listen, we need you to do this letter. If you don't, you tell me what you think and I'll type it up for you. But at the end of the day, it's going to be in there. So those are things that are going to differentiate you from the other offers. Just like Curtis said, on the listing side of the transaction, they're looking at everything that's coming through. And as you guys know, from a board standpoint, there's no such thing as the standard format for submitting your offers per se. So you're getting all kind of stuff that comes through, guys. You'd be surprised at the type of offers that I see and have seen, and the structure or, organization or lack thereof, and the stuff that just comes is like, what in the world? So this was very much meticulously thought out for you guys to separate you into whether it's your first offer or your 101st offer or 1,000th offer. We want you to present as the real estate professional that you are, having had foresight to include all of these things in this order and in this level of detail. Okay.
I've, I've even had a listing agent comment on my offer, didn't get accepted, but you know, out of the pile of offers, that particular agent did kind of make a point, you know, because I'm following up like, hey, is it us?
Mhm.
And just, you know, your offer looked really good. You had a really nice, your offer presented very well. Our price didn't, but the offer itself, you know, the offer itself though presented extremely well, and that to me really just stood out of like, you know, yeah, and it does really pay. It does stand out when we look at other offers that I've seen coming in on the listing side. Very, I mean, honestly, very seldom have I seen an like a offer as nicely structured as ours at Porterhouse. I've seen a one or two, and then they jump out at you when you do see
Mhm.
like it's like, oh wow, because at the end of the day, we're gonna be working together. We're gonna be, if we're ratified, you know, we're snuggled up together until, you know, we get this to closing. So, you
Closing.
know, you want to be with somebody that's gonna, you know, look like they have their act together.
So very important statements. There's something that you just said. Your offer presented very well, but the buyer's purchase price didn't. So this offer is a beautiful package and the bow wrapped and all those things, but the meat and potatoes of the offer, that's what we're going to talk about. So for this next brief segment, I want to hear from Marcus. I want to hear from Curtis. I've asked both of them to share about some of the offers that they've gotten accepted and what those, you know, what is the kryptonite in a sense, what worked well for you with those buyers offers that have gotten accepted. So if you can think of maybe just your top two buyers who, you know, we're in a competitive market and we have been in the last 2 years, but talk about some of those terms that were the heaviest hitters that got your buyer's offer accepted. And then we'll go through the rest of the contract because there are quite a number of points of negotiation and we want for you guys to be adept at all of them. So Curtis, you can go first just because you're virtual. And then Marcus, you can come on up because you're in person.
Okay. So one of the offers, very competitive. This was in the heat of COVID. It was it was over $800,000 property. Wrote a really good offer. Like we had every bell and whistle that I could think of was in there. We had my buyer was willing to pay for all tax and recordation, which was very, very big. I also was able to get him to agree, or, you know, he agreed to, in writing, in case the property didn't appraise at what we were offering, he was willing to come out of his pocket for another $5,000, you know, up to uh, the offered list, you know, what we were offering. That was key. But really what actually sold the seller was the letter. And I really went ham on the letter. Like I had all they had four children. I think they had four girls. So I had, it was like a story. So I had, you know, the little ones are going to be celebrating, you know, looking forward to celebrating their first birthday or this birthday. And like I really, you know, jazzed up the letter. And that's what decided us getting ratified. Literally was the letter. So that was one in particular on the buying side that I know our offer looked good and it was, everything was great, but that particular deal, it was the letter, you know. Yeah. And I've had, you know, I mean, I've had a few others that I think part of it too is the professionalism, reaching out, being over list, but not too far over, because you can kind of look unrealistic, you know, where it's like now you look like, okay, I mean, this hypothetical, it's a $500,000 house and you're offering 600, you know, like, you know, it's not going to appraise at that. So you're just trying to get under contract, but it's not going to praise. So why would I even want to waste my, not waste my time, but why am I, entertaining this offer when now this one is more lined up with, it's a 500. Now they're coming in at 525. That could be, that's more realistic than somebody just overshooting altogether. Unless they're willing to, well, I guess we're on the buying, unless your buyer is willing to come up out of pocket, which is a strategy that we can use, especially within the aggressive market. If you're going to go over list, can they come up with that money to offset if it does drop the appraisal? And that is a big strategy as well that I've used. Now if the buyer doesn't have the money, they ain't got the money. But if they really want the property, if they are somewhat liquid and they can do that, that's also a big strategy to stand out. Because now, okay, sure, it might appraise under, but look, we're willing to put $10,000 on top of whatever to meet that offer price that we're putting out there.
Those are some hefty considerations, guys. Thank you for sharing that, Curtis.
Mhm.
One of the things that I want to say as it pertains to what Curtis says, in this market, this aggressive COVID market, the bare minimum strategies are out the window. So your conversations with your buyer and your buyer consultation need to be informative, educating them on the current market that we're in. In this market, they've got to put their best foot forward out of the gate, not let me lowball or offer the bare minimum and see if the seller will counter back and then I'll go up. That's not the nature of the market that we're in. So those are some very aggressive strategies. They work well, and kudos, because I know you've gotten a settlement with a number of them using that strategy. Marcus, come on up. Tell us about a couple of transactions that you've gotten under contract with your buyers and what terms were most, appealing to the seller. What made them accept your offer? Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. So I would say some of the things are just like little things. Some of the things that Curtis said too. One of the biggest things I would say is let them, because I have a really good relationship with Mike Cooper. We all have a great relationship with Michael Cooper. Saying, hey, call my lender like right now today, and he'll let you know that this is, they have strong financing and everything like that. And I'll put the number down there. And then even in the synopsis, I've also gotten a lot of people talk about how great our synopsis is, and they really like how they can just look at the whole offer and see exactly everything that's pretty much in our offer, and then they just read and see exactly if it aligns with everything. So I've actually got an offer accepted because he said, he was like, to be honest, man, I saw everything on your synopsis. I didn't really read too much of it, and I could say, hey, let's go with this offer. And he literally told me that's what he said. So I was like, okay, well, that's cool. But that was at closing though. That was at closing. It was an investor, and the house was in Crofton, and he was talking about exactly how he's been selling houses for a long time and doing a lot of fix and flips. And he was saying that synopsis. He was like, he said, I don't know if I can't remember exactly what he said, but he might have copied and pasted synopsis. I don't know. But he was like, yeah, I feel like I should use that in my company because it gets spelled out everything. So I feel like using that synopsis and then also putting your own, like saying like, you don't, I mean, you have to put the things you want to have in that synopsis, but you also want to have like call this lender underneath it, because you can make the print smaller or you can make it bigger. So I would say in that synopsis, kind of just use the wording to say, hey, call my lender to make sure that their financing is great. Another thing is the transfer tax. I know when I first got here, I always used to put, it was like a standard thing that I was to put 50-50, 50-50, 50-50. And now sometimes I'll talk to my client and say, hey, you may stand out by putting, paying for all the taxes, or you may stand out with paying for 75% of the taxes, or you're going to stand out by putting that a little bit extra on the asking price. Even though we know right now, I put an offer in the other day, 11 over asking, and still didn't get picked. She said I had the lowest offer. So it's competitive out here, and you just have to get, you have to stick to it and just stick to your guns and just be able to know how to advise your clients. But I would say definitely that synopsis, and I always do use the letter. I can't tell a fib on here, but I've never actually written my own letter. So I'm actually going to take that advice and start doing that too. 'Cause I feel like that does make a lot of sense. And it makes it more personable. I see that all the time. But I always put the standard letter that comes in the offer. So I always use that letter. And I would say that's pretty much it.
So those are some great features that you talked about. One of the things that you said is that we all have a great relationship with the lender, so we can call him. Can you guys tell me what things we would need to verify? Well, you know what? I'm not going to start asking you questions to everybody else just yet. Let's just say it like this. In this competitive market, you should be having a conversation with the lender, with your active buyer on a regular basis, because when you get that lender letter, you need to know, hey, I see this lender letter for this particular property. It's at 850,000. How much wiggle room do we have? Right? You need to know information in advance so you know what your offer strategy can be. You need to know if, okay, well, this buyer was approved at a 40% ratio, but they can actually go up to, 950,000. This is just their sweet spot. So this is just where they were comfortable at the moment, but they have a lot of wiggle room. You need to have the conversation with the buyer and with the lender as well. How much, liquid assets does this buyer have? So that when I'm preparing my offer, I know if I'm in a situation like Marcus said, offering $11,000 over list price and not getting it, how far above list is my buyer able to go? If it doesn't appraise for this value, how much is my buyer able to put down? You know what I mean? In order to get that property, like Curtis said, accepted, because hey, we're willing to offer 5,000 over the appraised value. So those are some considerations that have to be made in advance, and those are never speculations that can be made. You have to ask that information of the buyer and the lender, and you got to verify. So even if you talk to the buyer about it, you can't submit it that way just without verifying with the lender, because they're the ones that are going to be knowledgeable of the ratios and how much the buyer has to have remaining in their accounts and all of the different things that source the funds that the buyer is going to be using for that down payment. So
Hey,
excellent insight. You had something?
yeah, real quick, Jazz, this that is so powerful and so key with our buyers. So what I personally will do is, once we get the lender letter, which, as Shay always says, that's our golden ticket. Now we can go shopping. It's an immediate, real kind of like real deal conversation with that buyer. Okay, you're approved for 500. There's no way we're shopping for a house that's 500, like, at all. Like, I'm not wasting your time. I'm not wasting my time. So if you're approved at 500 and that 500 is your comfortable spot, so whatever they're comfortable at, we're going to take that number. And I even set their search up where I'm not even entertaining near that 500. Wherever you're at, we need to drop that so that now we can really have a competitive, because we got to go over list. There's no way around it. So we need to look, if you're approved at 500, we need to be looking at like 450, 460, 475. Once we get like 480, we can, there's a shot, but just to keep it, keep it a buck, keep it 100. Like, we have to be very aggressive with when we submit our offer, but having that conversation with them, even before we look, at the first property, it'll manage that expectation, and it puts things really into perspective. If there's real pushback, sure, okay, we'll adjust the search, or I'll do this and that. But, more than likely, I know what's going to happen. It'll happen. And then it's kind of like, remember, yep, I told you we got to go here. So then you build that trust too, that you are the expert. But I come out the gate like, okay, you're approved here, but we need to go. We ain't looking over it. that's for sure. Because other people, that's what they're doing, So yeah, it's very important in the beginning, buyer consultation. And this is what I weave into that consultation is like, manage the expectation. Okay, we got to drop that search and look around here.
Excellent pointers. Herman, I see you've unmuted yourself. Did you have something to add or a question for Curtis?
Well, I just wanted to add something very quickly, and that was that when I had my, it was really my first buyer. And I have to give a lot of shout outs to you and Mr. Porter, because one of the things that you guys had always said was that you have to let people know that the market is on fire, but that also the market has a voice. And the fact that the market has a voice really dictates how we're going to, the strategy that we're going to use to be able to, what houses we're going to look at. So like Curtis just said, Mr. Porter told me, he said, now, regardless of what they got pre-approved for, we have to utilize a strategy that will give them enough wiggle room that they can start low and we have room to go up. So I had a client that had the same situation. It's about $400,000 that she was pre-approved for. We started looking at houses that were like 365. And when we found something that was around 365, 370, we made the offer for 385. So it went $15,000 over. She still was way under what she was pre-approved for. And it worked it worked perfectly. And so, but one of the things that we did, I explained that to her during the buyer's consultation. So I think that's one of the things that you have to do. You have to be aware, because a lot of times people want to go, like Curtis said, they want to go, okay, I was approved for 500, so I'm going to look at 500,000 houses. And we have to let them know that that's not the way we do it. That's not the strategy that we use.
Excellent pointers, Kermon. Thank you for sharing that. So my next question for you guys, for Marcus and for Curtis and for anybody else who wants to contribute to the conversation as well. So your buyers that you've gotten under contract, right? This is a very competitive market. Of the terms that are highlighted on the synopsis page, which one of them have you had to basically give the most counsel to your buyer in order for them to overcome any heartache with agreeing to, whatever strategies you supposed? And by that, what I mean is, if it was adding, $10,000, $15,000 to list price, $20,000 to list price, or like you said, Marcus, talking to the buyer about doing 75% transfer recordation or 100%, or, whatever the term was. It could have been offering to pay above the appraised value if it didn't appraise. It could have been a number of things. So what are some of the biggest features that you've had to help a buyer to overcome, I guess, their thought process in order to see how using that competitive edge would get their offer accepted? And that was a mouthful, so I'll give you guys a second to think about it.
I'm sorry. Yeah. No, go ahead, Curtis.
All three of you started at the same time.
No, you guys go ahead.
No, I guess for me, I haven't had, any real heartache or hardship with the buyers, because I've prepped them so well in the beginning that they really know what's expected. So there's no surprise, there's no shock of, the market, because I've told you. So, this is pretty much how you want the house, this is how we can get the house. And I don't leave it open-ended. It's pretty much, this is what we're going to do. This is the strategy. This is what works with my buyers. This is what's worked with me in the past. So they're kind of already prepped that now, okay, look, I'm going back home, or I'm getting back to the office. I'm going to start working on the offer. I need the picture of their earnest money deposit for, we are going over, or, it's not even a point of like, are we going over? They just know, like, look, okay, this is the price. I'm going to need the picture of the check for that. And I'm going to start working on the offer. If we're going to do a 50-50, or, if they're willing to do, anything else, it's already kind of been disclosed before we went shopping. So there's no real, what do you mean I have to go over list? Like, no. We already ironed that out.
So what I'm hearing is setting the expectation in advance is key. All right. We're not playing games. We're about serious business. If you want the house, this is a strategy. This is how we can get it. Okay. Marcus, come on up and you can share.
Yes, I'm right with Curtis. Setting the expectation. Should we be moving the mouse? Let me not do that. Okay, definitely setting the expectation is big. You always have to really set the expectation high so they know exactly what they're coming into. But we all know that buyers don't listen to us all the time. So sometimes you do have to re-emphasize exactly what it is. And most of the times that thing that you will have to tell your buyer is, hey, this is a competitive market, and look them in their eye and tell them that, look, this is, you have to go over or you're not going to get accepted. Not even going to look at it. I might not even look at it if you tell me to go under. So like, so, I mean, but I'm just being serious. You have to listen to your client all the time, but you have to be straight up with them at the same time too. But like sometimes you just gotta tell them like, look, if you're thinking about putting something offered lower than asking price in this market, it's not going to go through. And me being in real estate for like going on my third year, uh, I've been in this real estate market the whole time. This is what I know. And me talking to other agents, I feel like I've probably even if they've been in real estate longer, I feel like I may have written more offers than them now because I have to shoot, and they might not go through or they might go through. So I would say the biggest thing is telling them to actually to go over. That would probably be your biggest the biggest thing with talking to a buyer about going over it. But you have to explain exactly why going over is the reason that your offer is going to get picked. And that's the biggest thing I would say. The reason why your offer actually will get picked because you're going over. And the other things are maybe putting a bigger earnest money deposit. But the biggest thing that I would say most buyers will, ask exactly questions because every buyer has this thing in their head that they're going to have this awesome, the greatest deal ever. And they think that you're, Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man like combined. So yeah, so I would say for the most part, telling them, really getting that into their head that this market is on fire and you are going to have to go over. And just like how Curtis was saying, like if you're getting a pre-approval at 500,000, let's look between like 50,000 less and see what we can play with, because that's kind of like what the market is, because they start looking at 500,000 and they're going to get upset. You're going to get upset, and it's going to be a whole lot of running around.
Excellent point. Excellent insight. So preparation, education, setting the expectation up front. Does anybody hear a common theme here? Anybody? If you hear a common theme, let me see you put your
Absolutely.
hand up or unmute yourself. Let me know if you hear anything in common.
Yes, indeed.
Is Kermon the only one that hears something in common here with getting those offers accepted in this hectic COVID market, or this competitive COVID market, we should say? All right.
I have a
So,
question.
hello, Christian. How are you?
Well, thank you. How are you people doing today?
Doing well.
Yes, I have something to say or add to the conversation regarding being aggressive. I mean, based on what I've seen, irrespective of the way the market has been, there are properties that sit on the market longer than normal. And it is also important, if your clients happen to see any of those properties and like it, and you see that the property has been sitting on the market and you look, there is nothing obviously wrong with that property, I think it's still wise to go in at the normal action price or something like that. Because, for instance, Jasmine, you know that we bought a property recently.
Mhm.
And what I did, we came into this property, looked at it. Actually, um, we are the first set of people that looked into the property. And when we came into this property, I love it. They have the acreage I was expecting, and the brick. The house literally had everything I wanted. What it didn't have, the floor was a problem. And I've already told my wife, we are ready to change the floors when we come in, or even before we move in. So if we see a property that we love it, but cosmetic, we can deal with it. So when we saw this, and what they were asking for was 668 600,000. No, 669 something, almost 670. Actually, what they were asking for was 670. So what is it 670 or 680? Because we went halfway. So what I did was looking at other properties. Actually, we put in an offer in one other property that relatively was good, better than this one in terms of the floor, but the location, I didn't so much like it because the way to drive into the place was something I didn't so much like. So we put in an offer anyway, expecting that it may go, it might not, you know. Couple of days after the listing agent called me, and she said, I know the day you came and looked at this property, you indicated that you really liked it. Are you ready to put in an offer? I said, not at this moment, because we put in an offer. If it is still in the market, when we get a response, if the response is negative, then we have to put in an offer. By then, I was looking at time, and I see that it's sitting in the market 2 weeks, 3 weeks, which is quite an unusual thing. And a lot of people have been coming to the property. The traffic was heavy. So when we got the negative response from the other property, then we put in an offer. I went lower than what they were asking for. And what they did was they counter offered and came halfway between what they were asking for and what I asked. Then I accepted and I put in the fund. Actually, when I accepted, I said, okay, if that's what you want us to do, ratify the contract on your own part and send it to us. Then we'll be able to sign, so that when we sign, it means that we have a deal. That's what we did. And we have the property. They're working on the floor. They almost finished changing the floor as we speak, and we are ready to move in. That happens. And I want to use this opportunity also to say that Jasmine and Mr. Porter, they really went far and beyond. I requested a document. That document came at a lightning speed. And honestly, if it is a test of character and commitment, they got an excellent result on my part. I cannot thank them enough, and it will be unreasonable if I don't say it for other people to hear it. Thank you.
You are so welcome, Christian, and thank you for sharing that. So I hear a couple different things in there, right? And those are 2 additional trainings. So thank you, Christian, for giving us additional training topics, right? So one of them is the exception to the rule with regards to the buying or the purchase process in this COVID market, because there are going to be properties that, for the top 3 reasons that properties sit on the market, is number 1, overpriced. Number 2, doesn't show well. So there's some type of items of disrepair or something that's an eyesore that will deter the buyer from making an offer. Or number 3, access. And you heard Christian say all 3 of those things: the price, the showing aspect with the floors, and then the access, the way that you had to go to get into the property. So for those buyers that are the exception to the rule, that want to look for a low ball in this, in the competitive market, that is a strategy that you can help them on, with looking for properties that have been sitting on the market and going and negotiating a lower price on those properties. And then the other aspect on the listing side is knowing the market and what that property can command and what things you can do in order to get that property to move most quickly. Like, what concessions can you offer? Can your sellers get those floors replaced? If they can't, are they willing to offer some type of credit? If they're not, are they willing to reduce the price to meet the market needs so that the buyers will still feel like they're getting a good deal with the property in the current condition that it's in? So kudos for sharing that exception to the rule in this COVID market. Those are some additional topics of conversation. Excellent, guys. All right, so let's continue down this path. In your offer, Curtis did a great job of talking about the layout and the structure of the offer. We're going to dive right into the residential contract of sale because there's some things there that you want to be able to articulate to the buyer. And both Marcus and Curtis thus far have done a tremendous job with talking about how they're dealing with the buyers in this competitive market and what's been working well. So one of the things that I want everybody to walk away with is preparation is key. All right, having that conversation, doing that porterhouse home buyer consultation the way that it's been prescribed, having all of that information up front so that you can develop that negotiation strategy is going to be, that's going to be your true winning ticket. You have your golden ticket, which is your pre-approval, but I heard somebody say before, you know, the market, and, you know, as Marcus said, buyers think you're Spider-Man, Superman, and Batman or something like that all in one. Well, back in 2012 and 2013, that was the market for buyers. 2012, 13, 14, that market back then, buyers were able to offer so far under list price, have the seller to pay all the closing costs, have the seller to pay all the transfer and recordation, ask the seller for everything under the sun, and sellers were biting and sellers were doing pretty much anything they wanted because that's when the market, it was truly a seller's market. Well, a buyer's market in that regard. It's currently a seller's market. It was a buyer's market at that time. And that essentially means there were many more properties on the market than buyers. So, you know, supply and demand. If there's an abundance of supply and not as much demand, what do you think is going to happen? The buyers get the pick of the litter. So that education aspect is key in informing the buyers as to what market we're currently in. Because when they come back and they've heard stories of old, and they're hearing about back in, you know, 2012, 2013, oh, well, when my mama bought this house here, she got it and, you know, 50% off and all those things. You've got to let them know the market has cycles. And that was back then, and that was in the buyer's market. We're in the seller's market. So let's keep going. Okay. So as it pertains to your offer, the presentation of your offer in that the information that's needed is filled in and it's filled in correctly. This is something, as we've heard from Curtis and Marcus as well, agents, you guys know, if any of you've been listing agents, you are helping your seller to choose the best offer. And there are multiple considerations in that. Of course, the strength of the buyer's offer, their, you know, their purchase power, the way that their offer was presented, and all of these things are a part of it. So let's make sure that we are putting all the pertinent information. You have your purchase price there. You have your payment terms. I received an offer the other day that I was reviewing, and the purchase terms in there, essentially the decimals were incorrect. And something like that in a legal contract is a big deal because the way it read, it was $12 and something cents versus $12,000. So the difference in that, the period versus the comma is thousands of dollars either in or out of your client's pocket. So be aware and pay attention to what you're putting in that contract. Okay. As you see here, just like Marcus said, with offering even more of an earnest money deposit. The purchase price here is $850,000, but the competitive aspect is, hey, we're offering double, like, well, 2%. What we do as a standard is 1% at Porterhouse, but if it's a competitive process, maybe the buyer can't go another $20,000 above, you know, list price. Maybe they can go 10,000 and maybe they can offer a $17,000 earnest money deposit or whatever that buyer's purchase power is. You want to make sure that you put their best foot forward. Okay. For all of our buyers, for Porterhouse buyers, in-house escrow holding. Porterhouse, we hold our buyers escrow, we protect their money. We owe them the fiduciary of accounting. And how can we give them accounting for their money if we are sending it somewhere else? Okay. When you're on the listing side, you can send that money to the title company every day if you want to, twice on Sunday, it's okay, because you're protecting your client's interests. When you're working with the buyer is your client. You have to protect their interest, and that's their earnest money deposit. At the brokerage level, it requires all party consent in order for the earnest money deposit to be dispersed in the event that there's some type of default. At the title company, it's only one party consent for disbursement in case there's some type of default. So very seriously, a seller can go demanding your money's earnest money deposit and trying to put the press on the title company and get it from the title company, not at the brokerage. So that being said, that's a very important consideration to make when you are submitting that earnest money deposit. Okay, your settlement. Now, listen, if Michael Cooper can get it done in 21 days, that's a really big deal. Put 21 days in your contract. You have that conversation with them in advance. Hey, Cooper, you know, is it the busy time of the month, or can you get this done in 21 days? No more than 30 days on that contract. Okay, your financing type, the lender's going to send that over to you in the lender letter, so you don't necessarily have as much control over that aspect. Some, of course, are going to be a little bit easier for the seller than others, but whatever your buyer's financing type, you put it there, make sure that they get their financing commitment in, because this is what the listing agent and the seller are going to be looking at. They're looking at contingency periods. Because in order for this contract to be golden, it has to be airtight and have the least amount of gaps so that the contract can't fall through. You have your financing application and commitment. Say by chance you have a 21-day contract and you have 21 days in that financing commitment, that means you don't really have a contract. Because if you're trying to close in 21 days and you're also saying, hey, give my buyer 21 days to get their financing application completed, that's going to end up being a 2-month contract. So pay attention to those things. You want to make sure that that contingency window is as small as possible so that your buyer is diligent to get that application done as soon as they are ratified. The ball should keep moving forward. There should be that forward momentum. Okay. That commitment period, 21 days. You don't want to ask for a 45-day commitment period unless your buyer has a VA loan or unless they have some type of down payment assistance program. But these are considerations that the listing agent is making as well. If you're asking for a 45-day contingency period for your financing and you have somebody else who's coming in asking for 21 days and you both have the same purchase price, whose offer do you think that seller's going to go with? 21 days. 21 days it is. All right, guys. Another negotiation feature. Let's be aware of paragraph 13, inclusions and exclusions, that needs to be executed every time because this is a point of negotiation. This is what your buyer's asking for. Okay. The seller has filled out the inclusions and exclusions that they're offering with the property, but your buyer has every right to ask for the chandelier in the foyer. If that's what they would like with their offer, they can say, hey, Christian, I want you to negotiate the chandelier in the foyer in my offer. Now, it may or may not have been included on the seller's inclusions, exclusions, but the buyer has a right to ask for that. So in this market, the competitive way is to look at the seller's inclusions and exclusions and make sure that this matches. Make sure that what is on your buyer's offer is going to match what's on that seller's inclusions and exclusions. Because one consideration to make, that disclosure is not buyer signed per se, so it's not an agreement between the buyer and the seller. It is between the seller and the listing brokerage, that inclusions, exclusions. You need something fully executed between the buyer and seller that says that the seller's actually going to leave the cabinets in the house when they leave. And I don't know if you guys saw that movie, can't think of the name of it just yet, but it was a real estate nightmare where
It was called Moving.
Yeah, Moving with Richard Pryor.
Moving.
Yes, Moving with Richard Pryor. So this is where you protect your buyer from that. Because if you do not execute this inclusions, exclusions, and the buyer is just getting the house, you haven't negotiated for them to get anything that comes with the house. So please be aware. Now, the good thing is that we don't see a lot of this in our area where the sellers just take off with everything that the buyer didn't check on there. The good thing, we don't have that as an issue. But in terms of legality, if it's not included in here, then the seller did not commit to that buyer to leave those items. So let us be diligent. All right. There's some taxes that you can put seller because they're rare. If you know it's going to be a consideration, maybe you'll do some type of split, but make sure you put something in that position. Whatever your addenda are, you're going to elect those addenda and any other special terms. Okay. Can somebody, have you guys had any buyers that have had any special terms or considerations that they've asked for from the seller?
Well, I know with the inclusions and exclusions, one of the properties, actually that one property for 800,000, there was a lot of custom features that were in the house. And my buyer really wanted like the curtains and the curtain rods because of the way the windows were. the uniformity of the property, like everything matched. And so in order to get under contract, I didn't press the seller about the chandeliers and all of these fancy things, all these nice things with the property, because I wanted to get under contract. But I did have the conversation with the listing agent that allowed us to, down the road, would would the seller be willing to kind of entertain, adding these things in, what have you. And that was disclosed up front. The seller agreed to it. So there was kind of like, they agreed that they would be willing to look at, these nice things. And really, once we actually at our final walkthrough, that's when the seller actually had a list or had certain things that they were willing to let go or willing to add in or sell to the buyer, like kind of afterwards. So in a way, I did my due diligence and made sure that, my buyer wanted those curtain rods that were custom. The seller knew he wanted the curtain rods that were custom, but I didn't want to overly press it because I want to get under contract. But now we're at the final walkthrough, and they actually got into, it was an interesting back and forth thing. Because he wanted like the kitchen, he wanted the table, this house was beautiful. So he wanted all this stuff. And I was kind of even like, look, like, a little bit fall back, let's get you the keys first. And then let's close it. And then, but he ended up contacting them after the fact. They worked things out and he was able to get more, he paid for it, but he was able to get more things in there. Or that was attached to the property.
So if you guys have a buyer that wants to buy the whole house full of furniture or the sale, make sure that they have some type of agreement with the seller, okay? So whatever that seller is willing to leave for that buyer and include with it, just draft a quick general addendum, that the seller's gonna leave X, Y, and Z for the buyer, okay? That way everything's disclosed. Anastasia, you had a question? You wanna come up so the people online can hear you?
They can't hear you.
Wait, you can't hear me.
They can't hear you. Come on.
How are you?
Oh,
Hi.
hey.
So my question was, for you, Curtis, it feels weird talking to myself, but I'm talking to you. Can I see Curtis's face?
I'm really here.
There you go.
Oh.
There you go.
Great. So my question was, with your buyer, did you kind of have a discussion with him before writing the offer? Like, hey, we can't really request that based on the market, or I'm hesitant to request that, so it may not happen. But the most important thing is the house. So let's just get under contract, and then we can, once we're kind of moving forward, we can see if the seller's willing. Is that kind of the conversation?
Exactly. So I just manage that expectation of, okay, I understand that you want the curtain rods, all of these things.
Yeah.
Put certain things in there, like there were some things that the seller agreed to kind of off the bat because she knew that these curtain rods were extremely custom, but the curtains and like more of like the more detailed things, but they knew, so it's kind of like, my buyer knew, like, just hold on. The most important thing is getting the house.
Right.
And then the seller knew, hey, at some point, you might be able to sell a whole bunch of furniture, or you might be able to, not have to worry, not sell it. You may not have to worry about packing it, dealing with all of that, because this gentleman would be willing to buy it.
Gotcha.
So,
So then, because you were saying a lot of it wasn't done until the final walkthrough. So in a case like that, where they kind of ended up having conversations, would you then draft up an addenda during like the final walkthrough and just attach it and have everybody sign?
Yep.
Okay.
So there are two aspects to that, and that's a really good question. So kudos managing that situation with the buyer, Curtis, who wanted to ask for everything under, under the kitchen sink. There are two aspects that we'll deal with in that, okay? The seller, they can leave anything to the buyer that they would like, that the buyer agrees to receive, right? There's two caveats. One is you want it to be a part of the contract, because should something happen, you want to have a contractual agreement that those items are to convey. The other is if the buyer has a financial commitment or an obligation that they have made to the seller for something when they're going through the purchase process, then that has to be disclosed. If it's something that, say by chance, they're going to the store and they're buying something after the purchase process, that has nothing to do with us. You can go buy whatever furniture from anywhere you want. During the process, if it is tied to the sale, you know, during their transaction, have that disclosure there, and you know, whatever that is, you just add that as a general addendum and keep moving forward.
Yeah, because that was kind of a two-part. There were certain things that were in the contract,
Mhm.
and then there was other things that they worked out after the fact. The deal closed. I'm not haggling about furniture. I'm out.
We had a client like that, a client, we sold the property to it, and then she told me probably 3 days later that, no, we sold the property for her. And she told me 3 days later that the husband and wife came back past and knocked on her door, you know, unbeknownst to their agent and unbeknownst to me as well. And they wanted to negotiate for some of the furniture. And she agreed to, you know, leave some of the furniture and negotiate other aspects of the furniture and all that kind of stuff. So we want to, you know, that will happen sometimes. The buyer will want additional things from the seller as much as possible as it pertains to your knowledge. You want to make sure it's disclosed. Anything they do after settlement to purchase whatever furniture and after you, we have nothing to do with it. All right. So excellent insight, great contribution there. Did anybody have any questions about that part before we move into the next part? All right, one of the things that I want to mention when we're talking about the contract in terms of functionality, flow, and presentation and all those things, this is a seemingly unimportant page, the contact information, but it is a very important page, right? It's none of the buyer's terms, but it's all of the brokerage's terms. And when the underwriters, when they are approving the loan, they're doing more than underwriting the buyer's financial ability. Now they actually underwrite the full contract. So the names, the agents' names are represented, their license names are represented, and all of these things are recorded in some way. I don't know from their side, but that being said, you want to make sure that all the information from both brokerages are represented there, okay? You have your brokerage, your broker of record, your name, license numbers for both. And one of the things that is oftentimes misconceived is this piece over here on the side that says broker/sales associate MLS ID. That is the brokerage's MLS ID, which is PORTE1, and then the sales associate's MLS ID, okay? Can somebody tell me why the other agent and the other brokerage, why would they need the brokerage's MLS ID? And why would they need the other agents, the sales associate's MLS ID?
Because there are, I guess they like different brokers.
That definitely has a lot to do with it, to differentiate between brokers. Is there any other reason? I'll give you a hint. Kermon, did you have an answer?
Could it possibly be to make sure that the broker is you know, up to par with that the broker's licensing and everything is enforced and up to par?
That is something that an underwriter may look to see. The other brokerage may not as much, because they assume, you know, oftentimes if you're doing these transacting, then you're supposed to be, but that is a really good point. One, I will give you guys a hint. If you are on,
we can't hear you.
Is that better?
Some type of feedback.
Is that better?
Yes.
All right. So for you guys, you've been on the listing side, most of you, as well as the purchase side, like all of you, right? If you are the listing agent and you're in Bright and you're accepting a contract and now you need to update the status in Bright, what do you need in order to properly update that status? And to put who the other agent is.
The buying agents.
You need information.
Yes, you do. You need the buyer, the selling agent or the buyer's agent's MLS ID. So this is where you're going to find that. And they need that for each transaction, because in order for you to get credit for that transaction and for you to be listed in Bright MLS, as the buyer's agent on this transaction, now, being reflected as such, they've got to have your MLS ID as well as your brokerage's MLS ID there. So make sure you have that information reflected there for each one of your contracts, but that's not a point of negotiation. Just wanted to stick that one in there real quick. All right, another thing, the FHA financing addendum. Tell me about this FHA financing addendum. Which term on here, or which of the terms are terms of negotiation? And as a hint, I've kind of led you to it on the page. Lender required repairs. What the lender required repairs when you're submitting an offer for the buyer, the seller's looking at everything. The seller's saying, how much out of pocket is this buyer asking me to pay? How much are they willing to pay me? What is my net at the end of the day, right? And the lender required repairs, you're asking the seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I want you to hold $1,500 in your pocket so that if the appraisal comes back with any issues, you will be willing to fix the issues from the appraiser on the spot up to $1,500 out of your pocket, okay? This has nothing to do with the inspection. These are lender required repairs. So that's what that paragraph pertains to. And the dollar value that you put in there, that is a further point of negotiation. So sometimes on the listing agent side, the seller may counter back at $500 for lender required repairs, or $0 for lender required repairs, or something like that. So just be mindful that that is a point of negotiation for your contract, okay? Yes, Anastasia? So Anastasia asked, in this market, have we reduced the $1,500 automatically? And the answer to that is there is no prescribed dollar amount for lender required repairs, right? That being said, when you go to the property with the buyer, if the property looks like it's falling down, you got to protect your buyer, okay? If the property looks like it is totally renovated in immaculate condition, doesn't appear to be any items, then you can have a more conservative allocation for your lender required repairs. But that's a conversation that you're going to have with the buyer. But even in that, you just want to make sure that it is fitting for the property. So you shouldn't be going to a property that's, brand newly renovated. Somebody do me a favor and mute yourselves. We're getting back. There we go. Okay. So if you have a property that's newly renovated, you shouldn't be going there asking for $5,000 lender required repair. It's a brand newly renovated property. All right. If the property is falling down, you shouldn't be asking for $1 in lender required repair. You got to protect your buyer. Okay. So just keep that in mind when you're coming up with those terms, that is a point of negotiation. All right. This is very important. This as is addendum, guys, because ever since this COVID market hit, this has been a go-to for our buyers, as is with inspection and the right to terminate. We all know that the alternative is the inspection contingency. I need you guys to talk to me. What is the biggest difference in the as is with inspection and the right to terminate versus an inspection contingency? Marcus, share with us.
So the biggest difference with the as is without inspection and as is with inspection and right to terminate, if you see right here where it says as 7 days, that's really the biggest difference. Well, I can, if I'm wrong, but the biggest difference is you're basically saying you're taking the house as is, but you want to make sure that it's nothing wrong with it, like no latent defects that they may have passed up or may have not disclosed. So you're saying that you're going to have 7 days to see exactly if it's anything that they're like non-negotiables. But you're saying that you're going to take the property as is, but like nothing you can actually see with the eye. But then as is without inspection is basically saying you're taking it as is. Nobody's coming to inspect it or anything like that. Not saying you still can't get someone to come inspect the house, but they're saying that none of that inspection will matter in the contract terms.
All right. Very thoughtful consideration there. Thank you, Marcus. Does anybody else want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, Ms. Porter, also was thinking that it protects the the buyer's earnest money deposit that you can get out of the contract, even though, you know, it's as is, as long as you within that 7 days, that it gives you an opportunity to be able to get out of the contract and to terminate the contract and still be able to not lose your earnest money deposit. Am I correct with that?
Thoughtful considerations. I'll let you guys know. Keep going. I'm hearing some good stuff on both sides, and we're gonna dive into it and clean it up. I want to hear what you guys think about this.
Yes. Can I go?
Yes.
Yeah. My thought about that is, with inspection means you did the inspection and you are willing to accept basically what the situation is that you can visibly see, unless there is something that you cannot see at that moment that inspection will review. And in that case, you can, because of that, terminate the contract. Because, for instance, if you buy a house that has septic tank and you realize that it is in a situation where the entire septic need to be changed, or the well yield is so low that you need to drill another and you don't have money, or you are not willing to take such responsibility, even though you are taking it as it is, but at the time you made that offer, you didn't know that you have such a humongous task ahead of you, or responsibility walking into the house. At that point, you give yourself the opportunity to terminate the contract. That's what I think.
All right. Those are some great considerations. I have Darlene's hand up and Anastasia's hand up. Darlene, go ahead and give us your contribution or question.
Hey, I'm trying to, did we talk about, because I know we're on home inspection, the as-is addendum, and I do believe I heard you say something about the contingency part of the home inspection, and I don't know if we discussed that. If on that, if we're talking in terms of contingency, is meaning that we have to have the home inspection in or you know, like that the purchase is contingent upon the home passing the inspection. I don't know if that was what we were talking about, because I was.
Keep going. That is a part of the question that I asked. Keep talking.
Okay, so in that case,
contrasting the two, the as-is addendum that has these two provisions, either with or without inspection and the right to terminate, versus the inspection contingent.
Right. So if it's contingent on the inspection, it's contingent on the inspection. It has to pass the inspection, and if not, you have the right to pull out of the offer or the contract.
All right, thank you. Anastasia, you had a question, come on up, and then we have Angela, whose hand is up next. Anastasia, come on.
So I guess I was just trying to answer your question regarding the inspection contingency. So I'm still kind of getting my feet wet again in this market, because I've been out of it for a little while, so I haven't fully read this part of the contract. But I was assuming that, I mean, the inspection with contingency is exactly what it says. So it provides for the contingencies of the inspection, meaning that if XYZ is in disrepair or whatever, that the sellers have to fix those things prior to the sale being finalized, or the buyer can pull out. So it just kind of, it potentially opens up for a lot more money to leave the seller's pocket, and for a lot lengthier transactional period, at least I would assume, based on the wording of that portion of the contract. Whereas I would assume it still protects your buyers from like latent defects or things that you couldn't necessarily see. But it also, to me, it would seem like, especially if you did like the inspection as is, but with the right to terminate, it would be a little bit better for the seller, because one, it's a shorter time frame that the house is kind of held in contingency with the inspection, and two, you're basically letting the seller know upfront, like Marcus already stated, I think, as long as there's nothing major, wrong with the home, like we're okay accepting it. We're not gonna go back and forth with you trying to get you to fix stuff.
Thank you, Anastasia. All right, Angela.
I was just gonna say, I feel like I'm pulling from what everyone said, but piggybacking mostly on what Anastasia said. With the home inspection contingency, that still leaves responsibility, I believe, on the seller. So, the offer is contingent on the seller satisfying whatever repairs that the buyer is requesting. A lot of people are using these as is, without inspections, because that takes it's in the best interest of the seller to not have to fix anything. So it takes that responsibility off of them. The as is without inspection is basically blind. You go in saying, I don't know what's wrong with it. I'm going to move forward. I don't have any days to even determine. The as is with inspection and right to walk away still allows you to represent your buyer. So they go in moving forward without those repairs, but not blindly. At least they know what they're up against. They know what the expectation they have, as far as what's wrong with the property. And then they move forward if they choose to, but again, to protect your buyer, because if they're not satisfied with the repairs that are needed, they are in a position to be able to walk away. So I guess one alleviates, these two alleviate the seller from any responsibility, whereas the contingency is weaker because it still holds the seller responsible for the repairs.
All right. Does anybody else have anything to add? Okay. So what I'll say is, pulling from what everybody said, we've got all of our bases covered. So now let's go ahead and cut off some of the fat there and just get down to the bare bones. Kermon, I see you're unmuting yourself.
I'm sorry. Forgive me. I hit the button by accident.
No problem at all. Okay, so specifically, as Darlene, Anastasia, Angela just said, with regards to the inspection contingency, what is the point of the contingency anyway? To protect the buyer, protect their earnest money deposit. If they don't go to settlement as a result of it, the buyer has a way out. They don't have to move forward. They get their earnest money deposit back. That inspection contingency, that document, I think it's maybe 4 pages. We can go to it the next time. We only have about 7 minutes left, so we won't go to it tonight. But there is extensive language on there that absolutely holds the seller responsible for not only the provisions of whatever agreements they make for the repairs with the buyer, but even the type of workmanship and the licensing of the people who have to do it. And there's all of this contractual language that binds the seller to kind of the gold standard, or at least the standard, if you will, in this market for repairs. So lots of language, just like you've heard in the theme, that holds the seller very much responsible. And it's contingent upon the buyer's satisfaction with the seller's repairs that they've made as a result of that inspection. Okay. The document that we use when we're negotiating those repairs, the inspection notice, which further has language that the seller has to abide by when they're agreeing to all of those things. So that is the inspection contingency. And if the seller does not perform on their end, then the buyer gets to get out of the contract per se. The buyer gets to get their earnest money deposit back, and the buyer gets to walk away. Okay. You guys have said as well, pulling out from most of you said the same thing with regards to this as is addendum, the 2 different options, either with or without inspection. The inspection is supposed to be for your information only. However, it provides the buyer with the protection that they can pull out if there's anything too egregious that they just can't deal with. So that has been our go-to in this competitive market. I would not advise a single one of our porterhouse buyers, unless they are an investor and they've been in the business, know what they're doing, to be purchasing as is without inspection. I'm gonna say that one more time. Our porterhouse buyers need to be purchasing with inspection, and they need to have a home warranty. We got to make sure that we are protecting our clients. Even if they say, I don't want an inspection, say, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, my broker, you're going to have to submit that to us in writing, because it's a part of our policy. We got to make sure that you're covered. You need to have an inspection. Okay. Same thing with your home warranty. If they decline a home warranty, I need you to send it to me in writing, because it's a part of our policy. We got to make sure that our buyers are covered. Okay. Because without inspection, it's as is. So that's all visible and latent defects, right? This right to terminate. I want to talk about this from the standpoint of us representing the buyer, right? The time provision, we want to make sure that those time periods are shorter, not so short that the buyer doesn't have time to fulfill it, not so long that it's going to discount your offer. 7 days is kind of the sweet spot. If your buyer's aggressive, you can get it done in 5 days. That shows the seller that your buyer is that much more serious, because you're like, okay, I'll do as is with inspection and right to terminate in 5 days. That's going to hold more weight than somebody that's asking for 15 days, as is with the right to terminate in 15 days, because now for that 15-day time period, the seller's kind of up in arms and they don't know whether or not that contract is going to go through, or if they're going to have to start over, because there's a whole 15-day period that contract could be dissolved in. So when we're writing winning offers for our buyers, those are considerations we make. Okay, I'm going to put a punctuation in that and say, but there's a caveat. Can anybody tell me? And I know that many of us have used this strategy before. If we are representing the buyers and we have gotten our buyer's offer accepted with this strong offer that we've negotiated, and our buyer has gotten as is with inspection and a right to terminate, they get their inspection report back and they say, hey, Angela, hey, Christian, hey, Realty Pro, these are some items that I want to negotiate with the seller. What do you do at that point?
Negotiate.
Absolutely. So both of you are saying it with slightly different language. Marcus says, send over the inspection notice. Specifically the inspection notice, not a general addendum that lists the items that the seller is supposed to repair. Remember, when we're representing the buyers, we represent the buyer's interest. It says as is with inspection and the right to terminate, the buyer submitted their request. The seller can decline it. But if our buyer wants it, we're going to submit it. And if it's on a general addendum that offers no protection to the buyer, send it over on that inspection notice. Okay, that inspection notice has language that helps us to protect our buyer. And if the seller agrees to it, then it becomes part of the terms to our contract. And now our buyer has further protection for all the provisions that the seller has to consider when making the repairs that they have agreed to make. Okay, so remember when to put on your buying side hat. Remember to put on when to put on your seller side hat, because you got to think like both the buyer and the seller to get their offer accepted. Once you get under contract, you got to do what you got to do to get your buyer to that settlement table and have them happy and well established and protected at the end of the day. Okay, so yes and yes, submit the notice and negotiate. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments or questions or anything in light of that? All right, I will reiterate one more time. The preparation aspect, you're having conversations with your buyer in advance. You're letting them know, hey, buyer, we submitted as is with inspection and the right to terminate. We will submit your request as you have stated them. The seller doesn't have to entertain them. The seller can, go ahead, Curtis, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in real quick, because of the most recent transaction that I had with now I was the listing agent, but with the buyer that didn't realize the 50-50 that they were paying for the full, they went in as is. So they were as is, no inspection. At the final walkthrough, another agent did the walkthrough with the buyer, and the buyers pointed out something with the burner. Like, for some reason, they were like, trying out the stove and this. And so the agent that was doing the walkthrough was like, yeah, one of the burners isn't working. And there was something else. And then there was only one garage door opener. And I was like, well, there's only one garage door. I don't know if there's a spare opener. And the burner, I was like, well, basically in my head, I was like, it's as is. And you're at the walkthrough. I don't even know why we're having this conversation. Go to closing and wrap this thing up. But me being, it's like, I'll check it. I'll look into it, And even my seller was like, everything should be working order. So just doing my due diligence, letting the seller know, I let them know everything should be working. But in my head, I was just like, wow, every buyer that I represent and that we represent should never go in as is, unless, like Jasmine was saying, they're an investor, they know what they're doing. But just folks looking to buy their new home, inspection.
Not without inspection. That's right.
Absolutely mandatory. Absolutely mandatory.
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. One aspect I want to say is if our buyers desire to have an inspection, it must be disclosed. The seller has to agree to it. There is language in both of these documents, both this as is addendum, as well as the contingency document, and also our contract. It talks about service providers coming into the house, inspectors and all those different things, and who is responsible for it. So if by chance the inspector goes in and damages the property or something, you know, the buyer is going to be responsible for it. So they have to disclose it and get an agreement, which is why they have to choose the option to have the inspection if that's what they so desire. All right. We are going to stop right there for today. It's a couple minutes. It is 8:31. We are 1 minute over. We will pick up next week. Does anybody have any final thoughts, questions, comments?
I have something, if hopefully it won't go over any. Something I learned with my last listing, that the next listing, if I'm listing somewhere and there's an HOA, I want the documents before I even, like I want them early, way before offers start coming through, because that was one of the things that happened with the last listing I had. The buyer basically waited until they got the HOA documents to pull out of the offer.
That is an excellent point to make, and we will be talking about that. We're going to be talking about all the other contingencies, such as your HOA. Great point to make. As we're looking at the number of days, 7 for this, 3 for that, so forth and so on. When you are representing the seller, right, you want to make sure that those contingency periods are as short as possible. So you have an airtight contract that is most likely to get to settlement, right? When you're on the buyer side, all of those contingencies are ways out for your buyer. So if anything happens at all, your buyer has a way to get out of the contract. With that HOA, you want to, as the listing agent, make sure as soon as you're ratified, send those HOA documents over with the ratified contract if you have them. If your seller hasn't ordered them, of course, there's a deadline. But as soon as you can, because then that's when the time clock ends for the contingency for them to pull out from those HOA documents. Kudos, Darlene. That's some great insight on that. Anybody else have any final thoughts? Otherwise, I'm going to end the recording. And if you guys want to hang on and say a couple more, you know, give some more thoughtful insight as you had, you can. But let me go ahead and end the recording.
Yeah, man. I have like a final, you know, just a thought.
Well, go ahead if it'll be beneficial for the group
I
on
think
recording.
so. Yeah. One of the first things that Shay told me when I first came into Porterhouse, basically, I mean, you're not going to get ratified if you don't write offers, and you're not going to go to closing if you don't write an offer. So as much as we want the first offer to get accepted, to manage the expectation, you know, that's probably not going to happen every time. One of the first clients that I was working with, I probably wrote 20 offers for this one particular client. Nothing was getting accepted. The crazy thing was the first offer I ever wrote, I think it took me like 4 hours to get through the offer, just because it's foreign to you. I don't know what else, you know, it's a new thing. After that one particular client, I knew how to efficiently, maybe not as quickly as I can now, but I knew how to write an offer. So, you know, look at that too, guys. Like, just because you're writing offers and they're not getting accepted, it's all practice. You're writing more offers, you're negotiating, you're in the mix, you're in the hunt, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to grow and become a better agent. So, you know, don't look at, like, you know, one offer and you're done. It's just part of the course. Like, if you don't write the offers, if you don't get that buyer to get out there and write that offer, you're not going to get under contract. So even if you write one and it doesn't get accepted, cool, on to the next. Let's find that other one and keep it moving. But that was a big thing, because in the beginning, I'm like, man, another one. But I knew too, I was like, because I didn't know what I was doing. And it was really practice. I was learning how to go through the contract, fill it out again. And then it was in dot loops. So something I've erased the whole contract. I had to go through it again, but I had to go through it again. So now, you know, it's kind of like I could sit there with a timer and probably within 40 minutes, I should be done, give or take. But like, that wouldn't have happened if I didn't write all these offers, over and over again. So, it's all good. If you don't get accepted, cool, just move on to the next one.
That was so important. I'm so glad you said that on the recording, Curtis.
See
Let's
that?
take that and move that to the forefront of the conversation with the preparation that we're doing in that buyer consultation and the expectations that we're setting, in addition to the market and your negotiation strategies. Offer writing. That is how you're going to get to settlement. So prepare your buyers in advance. Hopefully you'll get your first one accepted from the 1031, but in this competitive market, if you have to write 20 offers, if this is the price you got to pay to get into your dream house, just buckle in and do what you got to do. That was excellent insight to share. Thank you for that, Curtis.
That's what I'm here
Darlene
for.
saying, isn't that the truth? And Anastasia saying, yeah, she knows how it is when we were using dot loop. You finish up something and go back and it's deleted everything depending on what happened there. So thank God we've been with BrokerMint now for a year. This month makes a year. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Kudos. Does anybody else have any thoughtful insight that'll be beneficial for the recording?
Did you ever, like, sometimes maybe just like let us sweat just to kind of get us to get thick skin? Part of me feels that you did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, and yes again. So here's the thing, you've got to learn how to do it, right? And then once you've been shown a number of times, because you're going to be handheld, you're going to be shown a number of times, then after that, it has to be a point where the training wheels have to come off in order for you ever to get the confidence that you can actually fly on your own. The training wheels have to be turned off. And, if by chance you guys need to submit something for me to review or something like that, that's fine. But we absolutely want for you guys to know that you can do this. You've been prepared. You have all the resources. You have, everybody at your disposal. But there's nothing's going to supersede you actually doing it and you actually writing those offers and you having to rewrite the offer because something happened with the first one. And you having to rewrite 5 and 7 and 10 offers for the same client, because that's where you are learning how to be an effective and efficient real estate professional. It's not because you wrote the first offer and went to settlement. It's because you're actually learning and mastering your craft so that you're becoming more insightful, more knowledgeable for your next client and your next client. So yes, and absolutely. And I would be doing you a true disservice if I didn't. If I did absolutely everything for you all the time, you wouldn't know how to manage unless you could get me on the phone. So the things that are absolutely necessary, we're going to be right there every time. The things that we know that you can figure out on your own, we're going to let you guys fly, because we need leaders at Porterhouse that can open and establish new Porterhouses and that can lead your Realty Pro colleagues and contribute to these type of conversations. So great question, Darlene. Absolutely.
I mean, I've seen Jasmine with her cell phone, like, go through an offer on her phone. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, how is she doing that on her phone? But then it's just like, it kind of hit too, where it's like, I'm sure that isn't the first time she's looking at this at an offer. It happens to be on her phone, but the document is the document. She knows what she's looking for. And even today, I'm still learning as I'm going through the listing document or the buying document. Even with the training, I'm still seeing things. It's like, oh, okay. So it's a constant, and that's the whole thing, like, write them, be exposed to these documents, because you're going to see them. They're pretty much the same thing every year. Certain, caveats will change, but the meat and potatoes of it are going to pretty much be the same. The more you write, just like anything, the more you didn't ride a bike at first, you had to learn how to ride. Now you can ride it without your hands. I don't know if I can still do that, but
Excellent insight. Listen, I was a tomboy, so I rode the bikes without hands and stood up on the bike 2 foot on the handlebar and all of that. So practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect. And just like Curtis said, in order to get to a point where you can do an offer in 30 minutes on your phone, you had to have written a whole lot of offers. So take it from what Marcus was saying earlier. You had to have written and reviewed a whole lot of offers. And in your position, your reviewing is of your own offer, right? Remember, you've heard me say, in order to say that you have reviewed or proofread your offer, that is at least 3 times. And 3 times is not enough. You need to be going through that offer 5, 6, 7 times with, you know, a magnifying glass to make sure that all of those terms, every decimal point, every name, every date, everything that's supposed to be reflected there, and literally reading the spaces that say buyer signature and making sure that those things are done. You have some templates in your BrokerMet library. You have us to call. If you need me to review it, you can submit it and you can send me a text message. We don't have to review offers unless you're brand new and you don't know, you know, what's going on just yet. And when you are, submit them to us, send me a text, let us know to review it. Otherwise, and even then, we want to make sure before you submit it for review, you've looked at that thing 5 times, 10 times, because you're learning and you have to grow. Because just like Curtis articulated earlier, when that listing agent, when they receive your offer, they are going to be judging you as a professional based on the strength of your offer, based on if you sent it over and there's only 3 signatures actually signed, when there's so many spaces that your buyer's supposed to sign. Even if your buyer had the highest and best terms, the seller would not be able to ratify that contract because everything's not signed where it's supposed to be, right? Even if they were to accept all the terms, they can't even ratify the contract because the buyer's names are not spelled out on the different documents like it's supposed to be. You can't have a contract without the other party to the contract. So absolutely review your offers over and over and over again. And once you've done that at least 5, 10 times, send it over to Mr. Porter, send it over to myself if you're a brand newbie. You know what I mean? Send it over so we can review it for you. But nothing beats the hard work. You've got to do the leg work, like Marcus said. That's what's going to make you soar.
Desmond.
Yes. Hello, Mr. Porter.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
I'm gonna let you end the recording, but I want to address whoever that was that's asked, do we let them sweat? I want to address that, but I'm gonna let you end the recording.
You got it.